2nd and 8. Empty backfield now for Minshew. Takes the snap, throws a quick one, and that's picked off by Marshawn Lattimore. Pick 6. Welcome back, Marshawn. That's how you do it. Happy New Year, baby. You mean like that?
Just like that.
Hey, that happened. Welcome in to Inside Black and Gold. My name is Jeff Nowak. I'm your host after, what can only be described as a good win for the Saints. There haven't been a lot of them, but a majority of them have come in the last 2 weeks because the Saints have suddenly won 3 games in a row. And now it doesn't matter because for whatever reason, whenever the Saints need help from somebody, they don't get it. But we're going to get into more of that. Again, my name is Jeff Nowak, digital sports producer for WWL. Steve Geller is probably flying right now. We're going to get into what happened in this game, and we're going to rant a little bit, complain a little bit, and, do a lot more of that. But first things first, just remember the second half of the show is going to be a mailbag. So get your comments, questions, hot takes, whatever in the chat. I'm sure there's going to be more Fire Dennis Allen, but hey, I mean, you can't honestly think that's going to happen now, right? So, I guess we can all kind of just take a breath. But yeah, make sure to get that in there. And in the back half of the show, I will get to it. But yeah, the first segment here is just going to be a bit of a rant. You're going to have to forgive me. I'm a little tired. Yesterday was New Year's Eve, which, keeps me up past my bedtime. Today I was up 8 a.m. hosting First Take with Steve Geller. And then obviously the game, and I'm working. I'm on hour 10 right now. So bear with me. And we're going to get into this. But, the first thing I do want to mention is this is a team that throughout a lot of the season, you could say, what is the identity of this team? What do they do well? What do you envision as kind of the top end version of this team? And in every single answer to that question, you would go back to, this is a team that relies on its defense, and this is a team whose best defensive player is Marshawn Lattimore. And it was difficult to kind of identify or quantify, rather, kind of just how much he meant to that group from a swagger perspective, from a big play perspective, from just the idea that you can't throw at that guy. And that's the difference in this game. This was essentially a shot-for-shot remake of what happened in Week 13 against the Bucs. There was 2 main differences. One, the quarterback on the opposite side was Gardner Minshew. That's obviously a big difference. But 2, Marshawn Lattimore was in this game and in a position to make a big play and change it for the better. And that is why the Saints won this game, right? If you're just playing defense and you're just going down the line, Eagles are probably going to pull this one out. The Saints offense was dead in the water in terms of being able to pass protect. If you had to force Andy Dalton to sit back there and get teed off on in order to try to win this game with his arm, you're going to have a hard time. The best he could do was not make mistakes as he's getting Brandon Graham and Hassan Reddick breathing down his throat. That's what's going to happen. This is the team that leads the league in sacks, and you're going in there with 3 backup offensive linemen. You're going to have a hard time. And the Eagles did have 7 sacks today. But when it came down to it and you needed someone to make a play, it was Marshawn Lattimore reading a key that he had already identified and stepping in front of a pass that's just a play that a playmaker makes, right? And that's the difference. You did not have that against the Bucs in Week 13. I think if Marshawn Lattimore's there, you don't blow that lead, right? And this is a team that understands it needs to win on defense, and you need your best players to win on defense. And so, you can talk a lot about, why is this team struggling? Why has it struggled throughout the season? Not having Marshawn Lattimore since Week 5 has been a major thing for this team. And, I think this game kind of shows that. I don't think this game hides all of the warts that this team has encountered throughout the season, but it does show you kind of an image of what this team was supposed to look like. And here's Marshawn kind of talking about that process that it took to get back, because he dealt with a very significant injury. And I think him coming back for this game is a really good kind of just litmus test for like, this guy cares a lot, right? Like, he doesn't come off that way. If you listen to him talk, he's very subdued. He doesn't have a ton of energy in his voice, but he wanted to be back. And the fact that he wasn't able to be back was killing him. And he came back in a game, and, it's not going to end up getting the Saints to the playoffs based on what I've seen here. Yeah, I think the Packers finally finished off that just rout of the Vikings, 41-17, the worst 12-3 football team of all time, or 12-4 now, rather. And so the Saints win over the Eagles doesn't even matter, in the sense that the Eagles have now clinched the top seed in the NFC, right? Although I don't even know if that's true. It's still confusing, because they could actually lose the top seed if they lose and the Cowboys win the division, in which case I think the Vikings would actually be in line for the top seed, maybe the 49ers. I don't know. It's crazy. The NFC playoff picture is crazy. And when the Saints actually lost this game, and I know I said I was going to play Marshawn, but the Saints actually lost this game, I tweeted, oh, they're done. And then I found out within like 30 seconds, like, oh, wait, no, there's this backdoor way that they can get into the playoffs. No, they are eliminated from the playoffs now. That's why I waited until that was over before I came on here, just so I could have the right level of despair in my voice. But this is Marshawn kind of talking about getting back, dealing with that injury he had.
It was hard. It was hard because I've been back to practice for like 2 weeks, and I just didn't feel it. You know what I'm saying? So, I was mad about that. Cam been on me, saying he needed me and everything. So, it was just, I got to get out there, Really, it was just like a leap of faith with this one. Like, I still felt it a little bit, but, I had to be out there with my team. That's it.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the issues that Marshawn was dealing with is you have an internal injury. It's not like you can just kind of like take a look at it, have a trainer check it out. Now, you got to do like imaging tests to have any idea what's going on in there. And then it's going to be a question of, can you take hits? What's going to happen when a guy comes full speed and barrels into that area? Are you going to go down again? Are you going to make it worse? Right. So it's very difficult to come back from. But I think what you saw in this game, I mean, the Eagles had nothing. This obviously the Gardner Minshew Eagles, whatever. They put up 34 points on the Cowboys last week, a playoff team with Gardner Minshew, and they looked unstoppable at times on offense. They did not have a first down until the final minute of the first quarter in this game. They had put 3 and out on their first 4 possessions. If not for an interception late in the first half by Andy Dalton on probably a questionable throw, they probably would have gone into the second half without getting a first down. I don't know if I've ever seen that happen. I'm sure it's happened before, but I mean, that is a rare thing. And for a defense that has struggled to the level that it has struggled at points in the season, I think it's just, you see a paradigm shift with Marshawn in there. You see a confidence shift with him in there. Devontae Smith ended up leading the Eagles in receiving with 9 catches, 115 yards. I actually had him in fantasy, and I won my fantasy title, by the way. Just want to throw that out there. The Salt Lake Gritties took down the Bishop Sycamores, which, dated reference. I don't get why he's still going with that. But either way, good for Devontae. He actually, I don't know if he outscored Gardner Minshew in fantasy, but it was close. A.J. Brown had 4 catches for 97 yards. 78 of those yards came on one play. And that's kind of the one gripe I have of how the Saints managed the cornerback rotation in this game. And it's not even, I'm not saying like I want to see Paulson Adebo benched or anything like that, but I do think that, you're going to get through this season and you're not going to make any major changes in week 18, and because you're going to go into the offseason and you want people to be comfortable in what they're doing. And I get that. But you're going to go into next season, and I think you're going to really dive into the film and then what's developed throughout this season. And you're going to say, you know what? We can't keep Alontae Taylor off the field, right? Like, we need Alontae Taylor out there starting across from Marshawn. And so you're going to say, okay, what do you do with Paulson? You got to get him out there. He's a great player. How do you get him on the field? And I think you're going to end up shifting Paulson into the slot. And I don't know if he's going to like it, but I do think when he starts doing that, and you can see his open field tackling ability and his short area coverage ability kind of stand out, it's going to end up being the best thing for him long term. And so, yeah, I think that's my criticism, because you've seen in games, right? This isn't the first time you saw this. Last year, if you go back to that Falcons game, A game that if the Saints win it, they're in the playoffs, right? Saints go down. They come back from, I think they were 18 points down. They come back. They take a lead in the fourth quarter. First play from scrimmage, Cordero Patterson just catches Paulson leaning the wrong way in man coverage and goes over the top. Big play. Falcons end up winning that game, right? That game goes differently. That result ends differently. Saints are in the playoffs. That's how close it was. This year, week 13, Mike Evans matched up one-on-one. In another universe where Marshawn's healthy, Marshawn's on Mike Evans, and he's in jail, and that never happens. In this game, it was Paulson Adebo, who ends up fouling at the goal line because he got beat. And it's like, why is he one-on-one? And like, why can't you cover Mike Evans, right? You got to be able to stand up in that situation. And, obviously the Panthers didn't today against Mike Evans. Like, he had 200 receiving yards. But either way, I digress. Paulson has shown that in big moments like that, he struggles on the outside. I don't know. And today you saw that against AJ Brown. Now you could say, yeah, AJ kind of grabbed his arm and kind of shoved him out of bounds, whatever. It was subtle. He got away with it. You got to be tougher than that when you're playing. And he had already gotten beat. Like, you can say there was a foul there, but Paulson got beat. The reason it was a touchdown is because he got kind of chucked out of bounds. It's like he got beat either way. And it's happened too many times. And I think there's a confidence thing, and there's just, like a natural ability thing. And I think he fits inside better. And here's what DA had to say on kind of that rotation as the game developed.
Yeah, well, look, we like a lot of what Alante's been doing. We like a lot about what Paulson Adebo's been doing. We like a lot about what Marshawn Lattimore brings. These are good problems to have. Look, we felt like that was the game plan going in. And, I feel like we played pretty well defensively today. So I feel like that kind of worked in our favor today.
And I agree with that. Alante Taylor, I don't know I'll have to see the snap counts to see how much he actually got on the field. But Paulson Adebo had 6 tackles, 1 pass defensed. Marshawn Lattimore had 6 tackles and that interception, 2 passes defensed. And, I think the Saints did play really well defensively today, right? But that can be undone really quickly when you allow a 78-yard touchdown, right? Like, it doesn't matter if you got 3-and-outs to start the game. Suddenly, it is a 13-10 game because you got beat down the field. Like, it can change in one play, and you can't allow that to happen. You can't have that big of a mental lapse in that situation if this is going to be an elite defense, which it has to be. So, I think that's something you're going to get into the postseason kind of thinking about. But at the end of the day, this was a good team that beat a good team, and the only difference is it took the Saints 10 weeks to kind of identify how they could win football games and stop shooting themselves in the foot. And there's good things to be said about that, and there's bad things to be said about that, in the sense that this is a team that should be in the playoffs. Full stop. You even had Daryl Johnston, who dropped a Demario Dawson on us. I don't know if anyone heard that. I think he might have been like mixing it up with Rosario Dawson. Do you know, like the actor? But he went with Demario instead of Davis. He said Dawson. I don't know. Maybe he's a big Dawson's Creek fan. But even Daryl Johnston was like, I'm going to be disappointed if the Bucs make the playoffs, because they're not good. The Bucs aren't good. That what you can say about the Bucs is you can never sleep on being up by 10 plus points in the fourth quarter, because it feels like half of their wins this season, they have been down by double digits in the fourth quarter, and they found a way to come back and win. I think they were down 11 today. They scored 20 consecutive points, or 20 straight points to take a lead over the Panthers. I think they were down 21-10. Last week against the Cardinals, they were down 16-6. Against against the Saints, they were down 13-0. So, that's 3 wins in the past 6 weeks have come with overcoming a double-digit deficit in the fourth quarter. So there's something to be said for that. I don't know what it is, but it's frustrating because I don't think that team is better than the Saints. One other thing that we can talk about, and DA can kind of tease it here, is the offensive line. And we mentioned this. The Eagles got 7 sacks. They're the first team in NFL history to have 6+ sacks in 5 consecutive games. That's a stat for you, I guess. The offensive line did what it could, right? And what you can say about them late in the game is they iced that game on their own terms. And I think the Eagles kind of folded at the end there, right? They went for it on 4th and 22 when they could have easily punted. They had 3 timeouts. They're down 10 points. like there's like under 4 minutes left, but you can get the ball back. It's not the end of like the game ends if you give up the ball at midfield in that situation, right? If you pin the Saints down at the 5 and you get them to punt after 3 plays, even if you don't use your timeouts, you're going to get the ball down 10 on the right side of the 2-minute warning with the chance, right? No, they were 4th and 22 slinging it. I take it back, not slinging it. He checked it down. Anyway, very strange. But the offensive line, they did their job. And so you're talking about Landon Young, Josh Andrews, and Calvin Throckmorton filling in at those positions. Here's what Dia had to say on the offensive line.
Challenge, look, I thought, I really felt like, really after Ram went down, even the first half, I thought we did a pretty good job. It became a little bit more difficult, later in the game. I feel like those guys, overall with what they were faced with, I think overall they did a pretty decent job. I think Andy would tell you there's probably a couple that he might have been able to step up in the pocket and maybe avoid one of them. But look, it was, it was big for those guys to be able to step up and at least give us a chance, and that was good to see.
No, I agree with that. And when you look at, obviously, the pass protection was tough. And this is a really difficult team to stop. They lead the NFL in sacks for a reason. You saw why today, even with Josh Sweat going down with that scary neck injury. He was hospitalized. Hopefully he's okay. The Saints managed to run the ball, especially in that second half. Alvin Kamara finished the game 16 carries for 74 yards. I thought this was one of his better, at least more consistent games running the ball. He didn't have any chunk runs. He had one 15-yarder. But he was just constantly picking up 4, 5, 6 yards and early downs. And that's when the Saints are struggling, they're not doing that. Taysom Hill, 14 carries, 46 yards, only 3.3 yards per carry, but he picked up a lot of hard yards. He got a lot of first downs, and that's really, what you need from him. Obviously, the Seahawks type game where he just sprints for an 80-yard score is nice, but that's really not the offense you need from him. You need him to be able to fall forward and pick up positive yards and pick up first downs in short yardage, and that's what he did. Benjamin had 2 carries for 10 yards. I thought he looked quick. He looked explosive. David Johnson was nowhere to be found. So I think that's a good sign that next week in a game that, let's just say it, doesn't mean anything. I hope that you're going to see the kind of Benjamin featured role to kind of get an idea of what you're looking at in him. And if you want to really bring him back next season, like that's what you need to figure out right now is whether he's going to be a guy you roll in next season saying, yeah, maybe he's our RB2. Because I thought he looked sharp. I thought he looked quick. He's a good pass catcher. He didn't catch any passes today. Oh no, he did. He caught 1 9-yard pass. So I mean, if he can be, I have a suspicion that Mark Ingram is not going to be back in town next year, and so you're going to want to do something with a young running back, and maybe he's the guy. So hopefully that's what you get to see next week because I thought he looked good. Adam Prentice had 1 carry for 2 yards, and it was an impressive one. It was just a single back, no blocker, just handoff, and he just plowed ahead for a first down on I think it was 3rd and short. 4th and short. Was it the 4th down? I can't remember. Saints did go for it on 1 4th down. And I did appreciate the mindset that they brought into it, which was this is the first drive of the game. We want to set the tone. We want to go for it. Because the Saints team doesn't really go for it in difficult 4th down situations, right? They are more than happy to kick, to punt, and it's really just mind numbing at points where it's like it's 4th and short, man. If you can't pick this up, then you don't deserve. Then the defense deserves to be on the field in short yardage. Like, just go for it. But they did that today on the first possession. They didn't on the second possession. They kicked the field goal. And I actually think that was the right move because, I do believe in momentum, even if analytics nerds don't want to tell you that there's momentum. I believe in it. I think he maintained it there. On the receiving line, Rashid Shaheed again just was excellent. 6 catches on 6 targets for 79 yards. Juwan Johnson, 5 catches for 62 yards. He did have that 1 drop, which was rough. It was on 2nd down. It would have set the Saints up for a potential field goal. But I was okay with it because I think going up 6 points in the 4th quarter of a game is the kiss of death. You saw Ohio State do it in the Fiesta Bowl. Was it not the Fiesta Bowl, in the Peach Bowl. They lost to Atlanta. I'm sorry, they lost to Georgia in Atlanta. You saw the Saints do it against the Bucs. And I had my life flashing before my eyes with another 17-16 loss. I think my head would have exploded. But they didn't. They didn't manage to get into field goal range, and instead they punted it. And I don't know if it was that possession or the next possession where Marshawn got the pick six. And I would much rather let my defense go and force the offense to execute by their own goal line up 3 points than to give the other team a drive starting at their own 20 down 6 points where they need a touchdown and they will not settle for a field goal. Right? Worst case scenario, well, not worst case scenario, but the most likely scenario when you are up 3 and you give the other team the ball down at their own 5 is they are going to be tentative and they are going to settle for getting into field goal range and think we're not going to risk anything stupid that will knock us out of field goal range when we can get a tie. If you're up 6, that doesn't exist. It's 4th down the whole way and they just have to go 80 yards with no time constraints. And that's advantage offense. So I thought that the Saints lucked out with Juwan Johnson dropping that pass. Either way, he had a solid game outside of that. He had a 21-yard catch. Rashid Shaheed had the long catch of the game for the Saints, 58 yards. I won a prop bet on that with Andy Dalton's longest pass being over 33 yards. Unfortunately, my other prop bet did not pan out because it was Chris Olave total catches. It was 4.5. Now, you would think after the first drive of that game, you're in pretty good shape. Chris Olave only needs 5 catches to cover. He got 4 catches on the first drive of the game. Now, he was targeted one more time, and it was the interception. Yeah. He didn't catch a pass the rest of the game. I lost that bet, which feels like a bad beat. But yeah, Chris Olave, 4 catches, 42 yards. Adam Troutman, 1 catch, 16 yards on a screen. They finally ran screens. I think they ran 3 of them today, which is probably season high. Taysom Hill, 1 catch for 9 yards. Alvin Kamara, 1 catch for 7 yards. And then Adam Prentice, 1 catch for 4 yards. He's a guy who's been used a lot lately. And I think he's played pretty well. Demario Davis led the Saints in tackles with 7. Then you had a bunch of guys with 6. Marshawn Lattimore, Paulson Adebo, Daniel Sorensen, Caden Ellis, Cam Jordan had 5 tackles. We're going to get into Cam in a second here. But yeah. And let's see. The Miles Sanders, it seemed like he should have 150 yards the way he was running in that second half. He actually ended up with only 12 carries for 61 yards. And a majority of that was obviously in the second half. I think they underused him to a great degree in the second half of that game. Boston Scott, friend of the program, 2 carries, 6 yards, great in Rocket League as well. Gardner Minshew, 1 carry for 0 yards. But the number we're going to talk about now is sacks. Sacks, because Cam Jordan, Mr. Cam, he set a record for the Saints today. And let's just play some audio here. Here's DA talking about Cam setting the record.
Does that mean I'm a big part of it? Cam won't let me take credit for it, but I'm going to take a little credit. No, that's awesome. It's awesome. Cam's been a great ambassador for our organization, for the entire National Football League. He's been a great player and probably an even better person. And so I couldn't be happier for a guy, and it's an awesome accomplishment.
Yeah, so Cam went into the day 2.5 sacks behind Ricky Jackson for the Saints franchise record with 115. He ended up with 3 on the day. And the funny thing about that is he actually didn't know when he set the record because he wasn't sure what his actual numbers were. And it makes sense because when you get sacks, it's not like there's a big sign flashing that says sack 1, sack 2, sack 3. It's like, oh, sometimes it's a tackle for loss. Sometimes it's a half sack. Sometimes because someone jumped on late and they take it away from you. Like, for example, Carl Granderson and Caden Ellis both had a sack and a half each. And so the Saints had 6 total sacks. Now, Caden Ellis almost stole Cam's last sack. He fell off, and that's when he got it. But as Cam said, as Cam explained it, he didn't actually know he set the record until after the game.
No, because I didn't know if they gave me sack number 1. So I thought technically that was 2. I needed another one. It was that 3rd and 1. I wrapped him up, and he sort of fell, and I was like, what was that? Because he went for the pass, but sometimes they don't give it to you in that limbo. I'll take those. I take those. I wish I could have like the Michael Strahan freebie, but it is what it is.
Yeah, and so obviously he tied Ricky Jackson, and he ended up doing it in 6 fewer games than Ricky, which I think is a testament to a guy who's always available. He did it in 1 fewer year and 6 fewer games, and it's just he's a guy who's going to be in the Saints Hall of Fame. I would think he's going to be in the Big Boy Hall of Fame as well, right next to Ricky. I think he's had that great of a career, and it's just cool to see. He's just a guy who works. He never stops working, and I think that's kind of a neat thing to see happen. The other record that we still haven't seen set, I thought we were going to get it, but they gave Taysom the touchdown run instead. Alvin Kamara still sitting on 72 career touchdowns. He needs one more to pass Marcus Colston for the Saints all-time record in that department. So maybe even if they give the Eno Benjamin game in Week 18, you'll still let Alvin vulture a touchdown. But all right, let's see if there's anything else forgetting. Oh, yeah, one more.
Well, I think we executed. Look, I think there's a lot of talk about Taysom. I think we got Taysom involved early. I think we got Taysom involved late. He's a big part of what we did in terms of helping us win this game. I thought we threw the ball pretty well early in the game. When we were good on third down early in the game. Look, it became more and more difficult as the game went on. You're down basically what amounts to 3 starting offensive linemen against that defensive front. It's a tough deal to do. But I told the guys in there, man, just the way that they finished this thing out, pounding the football there at the end was really impressive to see, especially being down 3 offensive linemen.
Yeah, and I think that in this game specifically, you saw the usage of Taysom that you want to see, right? Like, you don't want him to be predictable, but you don't want to overthink it by not getting him involved the way that I think you did in Cleveland. And DA mentioned that. It's like people have been talking a lot about this, and it's fair, I think. But in this game, you got him involved early, you got him involved late, as he said. He iced the game. And I think he had 14 carries. That's a career high for him. The Saints are now 5-0 in games that he has at least 7 carries. And this is a team that has won 7 games. I'm sorry, they're 6-0 in games that he has at least 7 carries. And this team has won 7 games. And in that game, Taysom Hill had 81 yards rushing. So I think that there's a pretty good indicator that when you can get Taysom involved in the run game, it usually works out in your favor. Now, they did run an ill-advised flea flicker in the fourth quarter. I'm never a huge fan of long developing plays with one route concept. And that's what that was. And, the Eagles did a good job. I think one of the reasons you run that sort of thing is because, worst case scenario, Taysom can pull it down and make something happen with his legs. I think in that case, you're getting a little greedy in a game that, you needed to just close out. But no, I think that there was a lot of things that happened in this game, and a lot of things that have happened in the past 3 weeks that you're going to go into the offseason, you're going to look at. And I'm just, as frankly, guys, like, I don't think this team is that far away. I don't think this season is that much different than last season in the sense that, you lost a lot of winnable games and you kind of learned how to win late in the season, but it was too late. At least with a slightly different situation of, Jameis didn't play as many games and you didn't ever go off of Andy Dalton, whereas Trevor Siemian never really got anything going from a starting quarterback perspective where you didn't win games in the middle of the season. But I mean, when you look at it, very similar in how these seasons went. In terms of the quarterback questions, in terms of how are you going to incorporate Taysom, in terms of how good is this defense and is it getting better as the season goes on, and in terms of finishing strong, you need to get out of the blocks better. And you're going to go forward next season. And I know we're going to have questions in there. We're going to hit that mailbag in a few minutes. I know we're going to have questions about, well, okay, they won a few games down the stretch, but that doesn't change anything. This team still needs to clean house. And what I need you to understand, like, front offices are not looking for reasons to tear everything down, right? That is a process that you only undergo if you have to. Front offices are going to be looking for reasons and for indicators of why this vision is going to work and what is working and what you can do to supplement that. And that's what's going to happen this offseason. I think you're going to see changes, but you're not going to see sweeping changes. And I think, what you've seen the last few weeks is a good indicator of why that is. And I know that that's going to annoy people. I do. But it's just the facts. And this team hasn't been nearly as bad as the sentiment would probably suggest. It's just frustrating, and I get it. But you're talking about 7-9. You're talking middle of the pack. Like, this is not a bottom of the barrel team. This is a middle of the pack team that is one of 3 to beat the Eagles this season. Right? So, I don't know. Take that for what it is. All right, I'm going to wrap that segment up. We're going to come back with the mailbag. If you haven't already put your comments in there, throw them in, and we should be able to get to most of them. There aren't too many in there right now, so make sure to get them in there. I'm going to go to a quick break. I'm going to star a few of these, and we're going to come back and we're going to run through them on Inside Black and Gold after the Saints 20-10 victory over the Eagles. Eagles land. All right, stick around.
First and goal with the 1. It's Taysom again. Now he takes it quarterback to the left, and he takes it into the end zone. Taysom Hill right over the left hash mark. The Saints take the opening kickoff and just bang it 75 yards for the touchdown. Get that early lead, and not 3, but with 7.
Yeah, that's just carnage. That is carnage.
All right, we are back here on Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak, WWL digital sports producer, and we're going to go into the mailbag for this one. And you heard Mike Haas and Deuce on the call for Taysom's touchdown in the first quarter, the first drive of the game that really set the tone. I think it was a 15-play drive, took about 9 minutes. The Eagles, I mean, they really had the ball. I think they only ran 3 plays. The Saints ran 22 in the first quarter, and a lot of that was because you just maintained possession. You didn't make any huge mistakes. You didn't get any holding penalties that torpedoed your drive. You didn't get any big sacks. It's a great, well-executed drive. And it was finished off by Taysom. And, there's a few questions about Taysom in here. We'll get to one of them if I can find it. With Glenn Illich, he means Taysom. There's a typo. I believe Taysom turns 34 next year. I don't think that's true. He's 32, so I don't know when his birthday is, but yeah, he'll be 33 this time next year. How productive can he be going forward the next year? I don't know, but he hasn't exactly looked like he's been he's been slowing down. If I think that age a lot of times gets construed with like, oh, this is at the point that he's at in his career, and a lot of times that can be true, but in a lot of instances as well, if you're a guy who hasn't been used that much, your real age is not the same, and he started late. I believe because he had to do a Mormon mission, as that whole works out. I don't know the details of it, but I know that when you come out of BYU, you're typically later in your age than you are in your career. And I think then that's what's going on with Taysom. So I mean, he really didn't start getting NFL action until he was like 28, right? So like in that sense, I'm not as worried about his age as I am his health, and he's been as healthy as he's ever been this season. I think you have found a way to kind of keep him, I don't want to say like under wraps, but in situations where he's not as exposed, right? I think getting him more involved in the run game from the quarterback position as opposed to constantly running routes downfield and getting blown up over the middle of the field has been helpful. And a lot of his injuries when he's been a quarterback have been to his throwing hand. He hasn't had to deal with any of that. So, like, I mean, I don't think he's slowing down. So, I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't see why he couldn't do this role next year, the year beyond that. Obviously, when you get up towards your 40s, that starts to be difficult. But I don't think he's close to retiring. I think that he'll play for the Saints as long as they'll have him. And this is a guy who is having a career year, right? He just had a career high in rushing yards. He's the first ever non-running back to run for 6 touchdowns. I think he had set that record at 5. Like he's just doing things that no one else does. And so, I don't know how long his career will be, but I don't sense that he's going to fall off anytime soon. All right, let's go back up here. Charles Andrews with a question: are the Saints still in the hunt for a wild card? Now, I do have to admit, I was a little off base on this in some of our previous podcasts because I really just put it all on the Saints winning out and the Bucs losing out, when in reality there was this really kind of backdoor way they could have gotten in. But now with the Packers beating the Vikings, that is officially done, because that final wild card spot is going to go to a 9-8 team, right? Like that's the math you're dealing with, and it's frustrating, but it's true. Like the Saints could actually tie the Bucs next week if the Bucs lose to the Falcons, which they might because they have nothing to play for. But even tied at 8-9, the Saints would still lose that tiebreaker because, as we've talked about, the Week 13 game. And with the Packers and Lions both at 8-8 and playing each other, that means that one of those teams is guaranteed to get to 9-8, which is a record the Saints cannot match. If they were in a three-way tie, right, which would have meant the Packers lost to the Vikings and went to 8-9 and then beat the Lions, then the Saints would have gotten in that three-way tie, but that is no longer on the table. So unfortunately, the Saints will play their first meaningless game since, I want to say, the end of the 2017 season, that game against the Panthers. Another game against the Panthers. That one was meaningless in a different way because the Saints had already clinched and they were starting Teddy Bridgewater against Kyle Allen. The Panthers actually won that game, but the Saints, it didn't matter because they were already clinched. This is the first meaningless game you have played since that meaningless game. So for some reason, it's just whenever the Saints play the Panthers at the end of the season, it never means anything. Which, it's going to be a bummer for the Panthers because the Saints didn't control their own destiny. The Panthers did. The Panthers had a chance to just win 2 games and get in. The Saints don't control their own destiny, and they're probably going to win 2 games and get in. Win a game they shouldn't have won, and then go home with a chance to beat the Panthers. But they can't get in. The Panthers could have done that the other way. The Panthers could have beaten the Bucs and then beaten the Saints and gotten into the playoffs. But hey, this is 2022, and the Saints are not getting nice things. Saints for life. Saints don't deserve to be a playoff team. They did this to themselves. A few wins down the stretch doesn't mean you keep your job. Saints upper management needs to do something. Don't be blind. But what? Like what is your solution? Right? You're just fire him and bring in somebody that's better. Like fire everybody and bring in what does that even mean? Like, do you have a suggestion? Like what makes you think that bringing in a new head coach will suddenly solve issues around the team? It's hard to find a head coach, right? Teams cycle through head coaches over and over and over again. Look at the Giants, right? The Giants went through Ben McAdoo, Pat Shurmur, Joe Judge, and now they finally landed on Brian Dable, who is, he looks to, by all accounts, to be a good head coach. But hey, Ben McAdoo went to the playoffs in his first season as the Giants head coach, and then that went to shit. So there's also a scenario where you bring in another head coach and he's terrible, and then you're firing him, and then you're just in this cycle of bad, right? Whereas you're looking at a team that is still playing hard and is a couple of bad breaks away from being in the playoffs, and you're just going to say, yeah, pull the rug out, start fresh. That's not what this team is going to do. That's not being blind. That's just being sensible. I think there are strings you do need to pull. I think you should go hard on finding a young, innovative offensive coordinator who can give this offense a better, more of an identity. I think you should mine the college ranks for a quarterback if you're going to run a quarterback-friendly college-type system anyway. So, why not do that? But those are two very different things. And no, I don't think this offense is performing at the level it needs to be, right? They should have been able to find a way to put more points on the board and win this game comfortably with the defense putting out the type of performance the defense was. But I don't know what you want me to say there. It's just there's people that want what they want, and you're going to continue to complain until you get it. 504 code, DA might not be a good head coach, but we have to agree DA is a defensive mastermind. Yeah, I mean, I agree with this, but I do think that there is some growth in being a head coach, right? You have to do something to get better at it. And I think throughout the course of the season, I do think you have seen learning on the job, because you have to. And I think that he's doing a better job later in the season, and he's connecting to players a little better. I don't know. It's not an exact science, but you just got to figure it out. And I thought, one of the things that I said this morning on the pregame show that I was really critical of is, where's the pass rush? Where is it? Why has this not been a factor in games? And it was snap of a finger. Suddenly it's Carl Granderson's eating Gardner Minshew's lunch. Cam Jordan, 3 sacks, sets a record. I think that has been a missing element on this team. And, part of it is the secondary is locking down. And so they give you time to go after him. Part of it's Gardner Minshew likes to extend plays. Part of it's the Saints, I think, feel comfortable game planning against Gardner Minshew. They've already done it. They did it when he was in Jacksonville, and they won 13-6, and they kind of ruined his. If you want to look at it this way, the Saints kind of ruined Gardner Minshew's career, because I think he was on pace. He was on track to kind of win the hearts and minds of the Jacksonville faithful, and he had won a couple really, really good games, and he was playing really well. He got an offer from a porn company, and I don't know, it was weird. It's because of the mustache. And then the Saints came to town, and I don't know if Gardner was ever the same again. I think they kind of gave everyone the book on Gardner Minshew, and they won 13-6, and they made him look real bad doing it. And, he kind of just fell off the face of the earth. And then he kind of reemerged with the Eagles, and then the Saints show up and they do it again. I think that Gardner Minshew, if Gardner Minshew had only had his game against the Cowboys and then sat back on the bench and Jalen Hurts came in and led him to the playoffs, and the only tape you had was him going ham against Dallas and just hooking up with Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown. His offense looks like it hasn't missed a beat. And then you're going to get into the offseason. All these teams are going to be like, well, hey, maybe he is starting quarterback material. Maybe we can bring him in. Maybe the Saints might have done that, right? I don't think that's out of the question. But then the Saints show up and they have him put down the worst worst possible Gardner Minshew tape. The Saints cost him millions of dollars. I guarantee that. Poor Gardner. All he wants to do is be a starter. All right. Charles Andrews, I'm sorry. Charles Andrews, I agree about not deserving. Do you think Allen is just a bridge coach to allow Peyton some time to rest and recharge? If not, what do you get for Peyton? Do we turn Peyton rewards into a highly drafted quarterback? I don't know. DA is not a bridge to Peyton. DA is not a bridge. I don't know if you can be a bridge back to the same thing. I think technically that would make you like a roundabout. Like a traffic circle. But no, I don't think that was ever the plan to kind of like just like prop up the car and then have Sean walk around underneath it and then drop it back down. I think DA is potentially a bridge to another coach. But that was never the plan to put DA in charge and then have Sean come back. Whether that happens or not is another question. But I don't see it happening. I really don't. It's just that'd be a really awkward thing to do. It would be really awkward for the team. It'd be really awkward for the staff. Would you fire the staff? Right? Would you try to demote DA? That's not going to go well. No one likes to be the boss and then get told you're not the boss anymore. So like that would be awkward. I just don't see it happening. I've said on this podcast, the only way it makes sense to me is if, Sean comes hat in hand with Tom Brady on his arm. I think I could see that sales pitch being enough, but I think this team is aware that they can also get a very good return for Sean if they trade him. And that's probably what they're going to try to do as long as the market's there. Now, the market might not be there this offseason. And that's kind of where it gets interesting is what happens if the trade market doesn't develop and your best offer is like a 2024 second round pick? Do you just say, yeah, never mind? It's like, we'll wait until next year when these same teams are even more desperate, when there's more coaching jobs available, right? Like, I don't think Brandon Staley is going to get fired this season, but maybe the Chargers regress and they fire him, and then suddenly Sean, because I think the Chargers is where Sean actually does want to be. And I don't know, is a team like Houston willing to part with the number 1 overall pick? I doubt it. But like, would Sean want to go to Houston because they do have the number 1 overall pick, and that gives you some really interesting options as a head coach in year 1? I don't know. But I think that's kind of where you're looking at. I think if you're the Saints, you are trying to find a scenario where you net at least 1 mid to early first and maybe some other assets behind that, maybe a player, or you are getting a late or future first and then more premium assets, right? So if you're trading with the Broncos, who have a late first that belongs to the 49ers, that's not going to be anywhere near the same as the 12 from Houston, which I believe belongs to Cleveland, right? So, or is the one coming from Cleveland. So like, that's a different scenario. For Broncos, you would need, okay, you're going to send us more, right? It's not just going to be the late first. With the Texans, if they send you the 12, that might be all you get. And I'm like, yeah, it's not the worst thing, right? Because you ended up getting an extra first and you have your left tackle who you feel comfortable with coming in for next season. And he's gotten a lot of good tape, good, teach tape and good reps that you're going to go into the next offseason. And hopefully he can be in line to be the starter. And then you still get your first back. And the first you're given to the Eagles at this point, I believe it would be 11. If you go win another game, you might knock that down to 14, 15. It's in that range. And so, yeah, I think that's what I still think you're going to end up trading Sean. Because at the end of the day, he didn't leave to come back. Like he didn't leave to come back. And I just don't think that you're gonna ask the team and everything to kind of accommodate this guy who's probably gonna want to leave again, right? Like this isn't the first time he's tried to leave. Like he tried to go to Dallas, he tried to do this and that. He wants somewhere else. So yeah, you don't want to be that spurned ex that keeps taking him back whenever they ask. Right? Tax Act. The Bucks aren't good? That's a question. And then a follow-up. The Bucks just won the division. They are better than us, unfortunately. The Bucks winning the division does not mean they're the best team in the division. the Bucks are the best at coming back from deficits late in the game. Right? That's what the Bucks are good at. The Bucks are good at having Tom Brady on the team. If you take Tom Brady off that team, that is a 4-win team. Like, let's be real. Like, put Kyle Trask in, and that team isn't winning games. So like, I get it. Tom Brady's really good, right? Tom Brady can do what he does better than anybody else, and that's why the Bucks are in the playoffs. But the Bucks aren't in the playoffs because they're good. The Bucks are in the playoffs because the NFC South is bad. And I think what surprised me about the NFC South this year was not how, that the Saints and Bucks weren't a lot better than the Panthers and the Falcons. It was that, you expected there to be an upper echelon team, and there just wasn't. All 4 of these teams are pretty flat. All 4 of these teams had an equal opportunity to win this division. The Bucks won it because they were able to walk over the Saints as they forgot their foot from their elbow, right? They couldn't stand up straight, and the Bucks just walked through them. That's why the Bucks are in the playoffs. It's not because they're good. The Bucks are going to get torched in the first round of the playoffs. Like, let's just be real. They are going to get annihilated unless they play the Vikings. Then they might win by 30. Jerry's here. We're officially eliminated, but I'm good. Yeah, I mean, making the playoffs would have been fun. Probably wouldn't have gone well. Like I just said, the Bucks are going to get torched. The Saints would also get torched. I think they're going to end up, so they'd be the 4 seed. They're going to end up playing the 5. I believe that's how that works. So let's see. So the Bucks are going to be the 4 seed, which means they play the 5. And at this point, the 5 is the Cowboys. And I'm pretty sure they are locked in there because, the Giants can't catch them. Seattle or whoever's in that 7 can't catch them, and they can't catch the Eagles. Well, actually, no. So that's where it's a question. So the Cowboys could potentially catch the Eagles if the Cowboys win next week and the Eagles lose to the Giants. Now, the Giants clinched today, so they are where they are. They're not going to have any motivation unless they really try real hard to make the Eagles' day suck. It's probably going to be the Eagles in the 1 seed, which would mean the Bucks play the Cowboys in Tampa in the first round of the playoffs. And I think the Bucks get torched in that game, but we'll see. Either way, to answer the question, yes, they're eliminated. Did we need to see the Saints lose by 20 to the Cowboys? Probably not, but that's fine. Lonnie Lewis, who dat? We glad Lattimore's back. Yeah, it's good to see Lattimore. I really like Marshawn. I enjoy watching him play. And for the reasons you saw today, like, he's just that kind of player. Like, he just makes plays and he shows up when you need a play. And that's when you don't have that, it becomes obvious. Yeah, I didn't see this before, but Jerry just said what I said. So I'm glad we're on the same page. Jer Bear. I'm going to call you Jer Bear. All right, let's see. We got some more in here. Ricky B. I hope the Saints play all the young guys in the last game to see what they have for next season. Yeah, so I wish they had more. I wish the Saints had more young guys that they could play. That's one of my bigger criticisms is, like, why don't you have a developmental quarterback that you can put in? Because you're not going to put Jameson. That's not the guy that you want to see more of. Whether they should have been starting him all along, I would argue yes, but he's not a guy who you're going to put in week 18 to get reps. Because I'm not even sure, I don't even know if he's fully healthy. Like, he's healthy enough to play. We've already established that. I don't know if he's completely healthy. So, like, that would be questionable in the first place. But you don't really have a third string quarterback. Maybe you start Taysom, but again, you don't want to get Taysom hurt. So I think you're just going to end up with Dalton, and that does annoy me that you don't have a developmental quarterback that you can put in there. But yeah, I think Benjamin. I would like to see him get featured in this game. Landon Young, a right tackle, I imagine, is who you'll see because Ryan Ramczyk left this game with an injury. Trevor Penning, I would like to see start at left tackle. I think James Hurst has had a solid season, but you really want to get Trevor Penning the reps at left tackle. He's going to take some lumps, I imagine. The Panthers are a tough team to debut against, but the lumps are good. The lumps are teach tape, right? That's what you need at this point when you don't have to worry about losing the game. It's a preseason game in that sense. I want to see Alontae Taylor starting. I don't, I imagine you put Marshawn Lattimore on the bench because why would you, he's just got back. You're not going to sit Paulson to Debo. But who knows, some other guys, right? Like maybe Kirk Merritt you bring in there. Maybe you sit Olave down because you don't need to see anything more from him. You don't really have a lot of, I guess, yeah, like guys like Keith Kirkwood. Like I don't want you to sit guys unless there's people you need to see. And so those are the players that I'd like to see. I'd like to see maybe Caden Ellis start at the mic, see what he's got there. Because I think that he profiles more to a mic than Pete Werner does. Let's see. Are there any other positions? Maybe you try somebody. Maybe try like Kirk Merritt out at kick returner. Yeah, Lewis Kidd. Maybe Lewis Kidd is the guy you're throwing at right tackle. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you completely. I'd like to see them kind of circle the wagons and bring in some of these young guys and see what they have. I just wish you had more of them. I wish you could throw a whole roster out there of young guys like Titans did the other day. But I don't know if you can do that. Because what's going to be really frustrating is if, you throw a guy out there in a meaningless game and they end up with a major injury that impacts their next season. You don't want to have that happen for Marshawn. You don't want to have that happen for Olave, and it's football. Like you can't play at half speed. That is how you get hurt. So we'll see. Sean, if you fire DA for going 8-9 this first season, no coach will want to coach here. It's a fair point. It definitely doesn't project positivity to any future coaches, right? Like I don't think like you're going to set yourself up for a situation where you could find a coach, right? Like you're always going to be able to find a coach. But are you going to be the destination that a coach wants to go to, or are you going to be like the last resort destination? Are you going to be the destination for a guy that doesn't have any other options? Because like those are two very different things. And people are still shooting off fireworks. It is January 1st, 7:13 p.m. Still fireworks. Let's see. If it gets to day 3, I'll be annoyed. But yeah, I agree with you. I don't think that's going to happen, and I don't think it should happen. Frederick Wagner, the Saints played well this season, and most of their games were close. Luck was not with us. Yeah, I think when you get to the end of the season and for the team, as they look at this, they're going to say, we're an 8-9 team that should be 11-7 or 11-6, right? Like 2 games that you can look at that you should have won, right? Week 4 against the Vikings, you probably should have won that game. Week 2 against the Bucs, you probably should have won that game, right? If Mark Ingram doesn't fumble, you probably win that game. So, those are 2 right there. Steelers, you're 10-10 in the second half. You probably could have won that game. Bengals, you definitely should have won that game. You're up by 10 points in the second half. Bucs, you definitely should have won that game. So, I mean, you're talking about a season where, went about as bad as you could have hoped it would, or as you could imagine. And you're still right there. It's frustrating. You still swept the Falcons, right? You still did that. But yeah, I agree with that. Slugger 225. We have many bright spots to look forward to next season with all the new guys peaking this year. Not to mention can't guard Mike Thomas will be fresh and ready to go. Yeah, I'm not willing to be that positive in terms of Mike Thomas coming back. Like this was his year to really kind of prove people wrong in that respect, and he got hurt almost immediately with an injury that was not related to his original injury. And that's disappointing because now you're just injury prone. Now you can't, as long as it was related to the ankle and it was like, yeah, he just can't get right from this one specific injury. You're like, okay, well, maybe he can finally got that out of his system. And now he can get back to being the Mike Thomas that he was, which is a very durable guy. Instead, after 2 weeks, you end up with a toe injury that ends your season. And now you're talking about a guy who just, he just can't stay healthy. And that's the same issue I have with Andres Pete every year. And like, if you can't rely on someone to stay healthy, you can't rely on them, right? Because at any moment you might be without them. And that's not I like Mike Thomas. I expect him to be back. I expect him to work really hard. And I think he will be very motivated. I'm not willing to be like, yeah, they're going to get Mike Thomas back and he's going to be this plus asset, because he just hasn't been able to be that, as frustrating as it's been. But I do agree. Rashid Shaheed, I mean, it's mind-boggling how good he is at this point in his career, and with the limited reps that he was able to get. I mean, like, he didn't even have like a real training camp. Like, you give that guy a full offseason, who knows? I mean, like, I think his route tree is still kind of raw, and I think that's why he can be limited at times. And part of that is just not being able to rep it in the offseason when you have all the time and you have padded practices and you have, thud tempo practices where you can kind of do these drills that you need to kind of learn on the fly. And I mean, it's remarkable how good he has been and how how good he is at stretching the field. And I don't think the Saints have had that for a while. Like, they had Deontay Harris, obviously, Deontay Hardy, I should say. I'm sorry. And he's a very fast receiver. I think he's going to be a free agent. I don't think they're going to bring him back. But like, it's different between like being fast and being a target, right? Being someone who stresses the defense. Like, you don't have to be the fastest guy in the world, but you do have to be able to present a target, and you do have to be able to use that speed to stress a defense. And I think that the way Deontay was able to use it was effective in moments and against certain coverages. I think Rashid, with the size, he's 6 feet tall, he's only going to get stronger. The way he can create space and be a target with a big catch radius, that's not something you see. Like, the fact that he went undrafted is because he tore his ACL in the final play of his college career. And so, yeah, I mean, but with him and Olave, you went a long time without feeling like you had a good young core of wide receivers to put around Mike Thomas, and now you have those two guys, and I think Alontae Taylor too. I think he's a guy who you should feel really confident about. Sergeant Stickman, I don't know if it's Sergeant Stickman or Sergeant Stickman, says he has a good feeling about next season. And I mean, that's the thing, is you go into this offseason saying we just won 4 games. Like, all of this negativity, and assuming you beat the Panthers, which I assume you will. Like, you had this really difficult season. You went from losing Drew Brees to losing Sean Payton to trying to figure it out at quarterback. You've found kind of this idea of what you're going to be, and you're able to win games down the stretch of a season. If they were playing the way they are now at the beginning of this season, they would be in the playoffs. And so you're going to go into the offseason, you're going to have confidence. Players are going to have confidence. They're going to feel like there's something to come back to. The big question you're going to have looming over you next season is what happens with Alvin Kamara. If you could go back in time and say, well, maybe we should just have him be suspended this year because it's going to be bad, you probably would have done that. But that's going to be the thing hanging over your head next season is, you managed to avoid a long-term suspension this season, but I don't know if you will next year. And so that's going to be something you got to figure out. But other than that, I do think that there's a lot of reason for positivity. Justin Pasquale, the Bucs won't go far in the playoffs. I agree. Bucs are banged up. Yes, I'm all for the Bucs hate. Got another one. The Bucs will be 1-out. Yes, I agree with that. Yeah, I mean, if you're the same, we talked to the Eagle, like if you listen to this podcast, we talked to Dave Spadaro from the Eagles Insider podcast going in, and it was like, oh, is there any kind of nervousness that after starting like 12-1, you might not even win the NFC East? He was like, nope, this team's too good. This team's too good. And I understand it. It's how Saints fans would have been 3 years ago. Like, they're 12-1. They're definitely going to get a top seed and get a bye, right? And they didn't. And so, like, yeah, I can appreciate it, but like, I bet there's going to be nerves now. Now they should beat the Giants. It's the same team they beat by like 32 weeks ago, and the Giants have no motivation. But I'm still nervous from the Eagles. Yeah. I mean, the Saints, the way they're playing defense right now, I think would be difficult for anyone to stack up against in the playoffs. But I still don't think they have all the pieces right now that they're going to need. It's Justin again. I would like to see Kirk Merritt. I had hopes for him. He shows up in camp. I would rather see what he can do in this last game. Yeah, Kirk, I don't know. I think, he's on the active roster. That's right. They did sign him to the active roster. So he will be available, and I imagine you will see him. I do think that his route tree is not as robust as it needs to be, but we'll see. Yeah. You know who really wins this is anyone who confidently bet the over on the Saints win total, which came in at 7.5 this season from Vegas. And they're right on it. They're right on it. And so that's who this final game is going to be for. It's not meaningless. It's not meaningless if you bet the over. Or, hey, the under, because you're going to be rooting for the Panthers. Oh, man. All right, let's get one more and then we'll clear out. Oh, well, that's nice. I appreciate that. Ghost face Grilla. Just Jamie looking like a sure bet that Davenport is gone after this year, right? I don't know. I mean, if you have the cap flexibility, maybe you franchise him. You're going to be end up paying top dollar at that position, but he hasn't been a negative in the sense that he's still out there. He's drawing double teams. He's creating pressure. But he definitely hasn't earned himself a contract. And so I almost wonder if you're the Saints and you're talking to Marcus and you're like, we can't justify giving you a 4-year so-and-so deal. It just doesn't make sense. And the market's not going to be there for you. Maybe you figure out a way to, okay, we're going to franchise you and then we're going to restructure this deal so that it's not going to hurt our cap, which will allow us to get one more year out of this guy who knows the system and is a good player. He's just had a down year. He's been healthy this year, which is a big question for him. And then it allows him to make some money and kind of rebuild his free agent value and get another shot at the contract year. Because I do think that if he had been a free agent after last season, he probably would have got a major deal. I don't know if he's going to get that long-term deal based on, because teams are going to look at the numbers. Like, you can talk about hidden production, and I think the Saints believe that when they say it, in terms of like, oh, there's hidden production there, and he's getting upfield, he's pressuring, he's creating havoc, and other people are benefiting from it. And he's just not finishing off some plays. And I think there is merit to that. But other teams aren't going to be like, oh, yeah, we're going to sign you for the hidden production. I get you have half a sack on the season, but I know you've got more lurking behind the scenes. Like, no team's going to do that, or at least most teams aren't going to do that to the point where you're going to have a lot of options. Maybe one team is going to come out of the woodwork and be like, oh yeah, we believe that you're this player and you didn't show it this year. So I think that there might be I'm just saying, like, there's a chance he comes back. I don't think if you're the Saints, you are going to extend him on something major, but there is maybe a middle ground where they could do Marcus a solid and he could do the team a solid and kind of figure it out from there. And be where I think it makes sense for him to be. So to answer your question, I don't think it's a guarantee that he's gone, but I do think it's a tough sell to give him any major deal. But yeah, here's one more. That's a good stat. Andy Dalton is 4-0 against the Eagles. Fail, Eagles fail. Go Frogs, right? All right, that's going to wrap it up for us here on Inside Black and Gold. I appreciate everyone who stopped by, everyone who left a comment, everyone who hung out. I always enjoy doing these. We got one more game this season. Saints are going to face the Panthers at the Caesars Superdome. I don't expect it to be at capacity, but it's going to be a game. And we're gonna if you bet the over, let me know, and I'll root in solidarity with you. All right, y'all. Be easy. Peace.